I'm Cynthia, and I'm the host of the reality series, CPS The Horror Stories. I'm not an attorney or a social worker, but I'm a mom whose children were kidnapped from me by CPS. After 2 years of fighting, I did get my kids back. And the reason that I do this show is just to bring awareness as to the corruption and trauma that CPS causes families when they enter their lives. So, Autumn, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell me a little bit about you, where you're from, what you do, and so on and so forth.
My name is Autumn. I am currently living in Pennsylvania. I graduated high school this year, so that was a big change. I plan on going to college next year of 2021. Currently looking for a job, so.
Awesome.
Yep.
And where did you say you live, in Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
Okay. So, tell me, how did CPS affect your life? When did they first come in?
I was 10 years old, and I was in a bad home. My biological father was abusive. He went to prison when I was 3 for domestic violence, and I remember the entire fight. It was my first memory. When I was 4, that's when he started hitting me and my older brother, and then he started sexually abusing me. So when I was 10, I got a bad report card from school, and I knew that if I got a bad one, I would get beaten up by my father. So I told my friend that my dad hit me, and the police got involved, and OCS is what it is, where I was, Office of Children's Services. They got involved and ended up removing me from the home. Not me, well, just me, not my 2 brothers. I have 2 brothers. And I was placed in with a family friend. They couldn't take care of me. They would give me $10 a week for food. So I would go to McDonald's to get something off the dollar menu once a day. And then I lived there for a few weeks and moved to a new foster home. And I lived there for about 6-7 months, and they ended up leaving state, so I went to a new one. And so that would be my 3rd one, and they would leave me at rental houses to clean up rat poop, dirty diapers, and everything for hours on end. And they treated me as a slave. They would put me in a garage for hours to clean. And I tried telling CPS, and they're like, I don't believe you. She's nice. She wouldn't do that. And I wasn't the only kid she was doing it to. She had 3 other foster kids. And I was supposed to come. I was living in Alaska at that time. I was supposed to come to Pennsylvania to live with a family member. And that foster mom at the time would tell me that I wasn't supposed to go, that I needed to stay with her. But, I really wanted to be with family, so I wanted to go. And CPS came and talked to me, and they're like, what do you want? Do you want to move? And I started crying, and I was like, she told me not to tell you guys, but she doesn't want me to leave, but I want to leave. So that day, they picked me up from school, CPS did, and they moved me to a new foster home that night. And I lost most of my stuff. My previous foster mom took everything and sold it for herself, so I didn't have much. And so I went to foster home number 4, and that was just a temporary placement until they got me to Pennsylvania to live with my family member. And so I ended up coming to Pennsylvania to live here, and I was here for about 7 months. and it didn't work out. They weren't ready for a teenager. I was only 13. They weren't ready for a teenager, and so they sent me back to Alaska, where I went to another foster home, and I was severely depressed. I was suicidal. I tried killing myself, so I ended up in a mental hospital for 4 days, and they told me that there's nothing they can do, so they sent me home. And I went back to that foster home, and I was there for a couple days, and then they sent me to a small town where they have treatment facilities. And I was in an emergency shelter for a month, and they CPS told me that if I acted good, they wouldn't send me to treatment. And I was on the best behavior. I was one of the best acting kids there. The only time I misbehaved is when CPS called me and I didn't want to talk to them, and I would yell at them to leave me alone. And so they ended up sending me to treatment. I was in treatment for 15 months. After I got out, I found out that I didn't even need treatment. I just needed extra support, which they couldn't give me. So they were using that as a placement because they couldn't find a foster home for me. So then I went to a new foster home after treatment, and I was there for 6-7 months. That didn't work out either. I got depressed. I was thinking about killing myself, so OCS got involved with that, and they took me to the hospital so I can talk to people about it, get help. And I went back that night, and the foster mom that I was with, she was like, I can't be doing this. I have 2 other foster kids that are little, like you can't be around them. So that night she took me to the emergency shelter and was like, you can't come back. So then I was there for a couple days, and I eventually found a new foster home, and I was living at that foster home for 2.5 years before I was adopted 10 days before my 18th birthday. And 2 months after I turned 18, I got kicked out because before I was 18, I didn't have a curfew. I didn't have any rules that I really had to follow, just basic expectations. And as soon as I turned 18, I had a curfew, and I was like, that's not fair. And so before Christmas, me out, I had a pair of boots, 3 days worth of clothes, and they told me if I wasn't, they were like, you need to come to a meeting in 4 days, and if you're not there, we'll call the cops on you because you're a missing person with a mental disorder. Because I have PTSD, adjustment disorder, which I have a hard time adjusting to new situations, and I have a hard time coping. And I have depression, anxiety. And so I went to the police myself, and they ended up saying there's nothing they can do because I'm going to school, I'm not missing, and I seem pretty stable. So I started my life from there, and I've been living on my own since then. So then I made enough money from working to buy a ticket to come live with my biological mom because I've been in contact with her. OCS kept taking the contact away, like you can't talk to her. And a couple Christmases ago, I was supposed to fly to Pennsylvania to see my mom for Christmas. And 2 days before my trip, they called me and they said, you are not going, we canceled your trip. I had packed my bag, I was so prepared, and I couldn't come see her. And so I said, you know what, you can either fly me there or fly her here, or I'm never speaking to you again. And they flew her up there for a few
Who
days.
who was this that you were talking to?
My OCS social worker.
Okay.
And I've never been very fond of her. She doesn't listen to me. She always talks down to me. And I got to the point where she would ask if I was alone, and I would say yes. And she would speak to me in such a terrible tone. She had no filter. So that wasn't very fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I never had a chance to be reconnected with my family. And my mom had been trying for 5 years to get me back. And OCS said that I can't go back because of the guy that she's with or something else, but they're not bad guys. And she ended up marrying someone, and they were like, oh, you can't go back to her because she remarried. I was like, but that doesn't make sense. So I finally reconnected with her.
And that's where you are now.
Yeah.
Well, goodness gracious. That's a lot. Do you mind if we start all over and break it down a little bit?
Yep.
Okay, so you said you have 2 brothers, right?
Yeah.
And where are they?
I have my older brother lives with a friend in Pennsylvania, and I have a little brother who lives here.
Okay.
So,
And where is Dad?
my bio dad also lives in Pennsylvania. He is remarried, and he has a stepson. I don't connect with him at all.
He's the one that was sexually abusing you, correct?
Yeah.
Did he ever get in trouble for that?
I was supposed to go to court for the prosecution. I was 12 years old, and it was the military that was prosecuting, not the state. So they called my social worker at the time to take me to the military base to talk to the prosecutors, and so I did. And they told me they wanted me to talk to a few more people, so I was like, okay, fine. And so I went and I talked to these 2 people. Well, the 2 people were my father's attorney and my father's therapist. And they were like, can you explain to us what happened? So I explained everything to them. And the first thing they said to me was, are you sure it wasn't a dream?
Can I ask, would you be comfortable to share what happened?
Like with my father? Yeah, so my father, he was not a good man at all. He still isn't. Um, when I was 4, he started beating my older brother and I up. We would have bruises all over us. We couldn't even sit. And when I was 5, my dad started sexually abusing me. And he would always do it when my mom wasn't around. And my mom would leave for a couple of days. Whenever she would get upset with my father, she would leave for a couple of days and leave me and my brother there with my father. Because if my mom left with my brother and I, my father would come find us. And there was one point, I was 5 years old. I remember my father held my brother and I at gunpoint. And I asked my mom later about it, and she said that he sent me a picture with a gun to you guys and said if I didn't come back, he would kill you. So she had to come back. He sexually abused me up until the age of 10.
How was he sexually abusing you, if you don't mind?
He would tie me to the bed and touch me and everything. At one point, he bought me a thong when I was 6. He would tie me in bubble wrap and touch me. One time he tied me to the end of the bed, like where I was standing, and I couldn't move at all. He wasn't a good man at all. And my older brother, we came to find out about 2-3 years after I went into foster care that he was sexually abused by my father as well.
Wow.
And my older brother was also beat up more often than I was. So I was the smarter sibling, so I would go to school and I'd come back with really good report cards, and my brother not so much, so he got beat up more often. For that, at one point, we came home, and my father got the report card for us, and he saw that my brother had really low scores, and he picked my brother up and he slammed his head against the floor, and he ended up in the ER.
The doctors didn't do.
No, my biological father told the doctors, yes, I hit him.
And they never called CPS.
No.
I can't tell you how many stories I've done where the doctors call CPS wrongfully, and yet here's a man admitting to abuse and they don't call. I don't understand. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, we never had anyone involved except for the police every now and then. And it was, yeah, CPS never got involved until I was 10.
So go on. Was he ever physically abusive to your mom?
Mm-hmm. When I was 3, he went to jail for domestic violence, and he was only in there for 2 weeks because my mom ended up in the hospital. It's my first memory. Me and my brother share that memory because he's only a year older than me. And so I remember sitting on the stairs in my house, and my parents were fighting, and my mom ran across to the hallway where I couldn't see her, and I couldn't see my father either, and all I saw was a lamp fly across. And I hear screaming, and I don't remember much of what happened after that. I remember sirens and lights, but I remember when my mom picked up my father from jail, he was telling her to not tell the kids about this. And so I remembered that when I was 10. I was like, I wonder if he actually went to jail. So I found that out. He did. But my father was only in jail for 2 weeks because he somehow was able to contact my mom. He wasn't supposed to, but he was able to somehow. And he said, you need to come get me out. If you don't, when I get out, I will come find you and I will kill you. So my mom bailed him out. Oops. And he just got worse from there. And my mom was depressed for about 6 years of my life as a child. I would get up in the morning. I would go upstairs, get coffee as a little kid. I'd get coffee. I would pack my lunch, get my backpack ready, walk to the bus stop, come home. My mom's still in bed. We would make dinner. Sometimes she would get up and help my father make dinner. So, and my biological father, he is an alcoholic as well. So that's where all of his money went. I didn't have any Christmas. I didn't have birthday parties. My mom had to sneak money from my father to buy Christmas presents, and she had to put them as from being from my grandparents. So
Did your grandparents know what was going on?
they did.
And they didn't do anything about it?
They didn't do anything. When I got taken, when I was 10 and I got taken, my grandma was in town helping my mom with my little brother because my little brother was just born. Because I was taken away when he was 3 weeks old.
Let's go to when CPS finally did remove you. Do you remember?
Yeah. I was at school. This wasn't the day they removed me, but this is where they got involved. I was at school with my brother. We were at the same school, and our teachers get a call that we need to go down to the front office because we're leaving for the day. And I thought, oh, my grandma's coming to get us. Like, that's going to be fun. We have an early day. And I go down there, and the office lady said that the person coming to get us isn't here yet. And so I was like, okay, we'll just wait. So my brother came down, and I was like, I don't know who it is. I'm thinking it's grandma. And he was like, me too. And my father the night before that said, if anyone comes to talk to you about me or your mom, say you don't want to say anything until you call your parent, until you call us. And I was like, okay. And so the person who did the intake for me, she showed up and said that she needed to talk to my brother and I, and I'm not leaving until she calls my parents. And she said she'll call my parents when we get there. And I said, no, I'm not leaving. And she was like, I'll call them when I get there. I eventually gave up. And so my brother and I, we went to this place called the Children's Place. And they put me in an interview room. They put my brother in an interview room. And they started asking me questions, and I just started talking. I told them everything that my father did to me, to my brother, to my mom. And when we were done with the interview, which was about 4 or 5 hours, I walked down the hall and I could hear crying. And I instantly knew that it was my mom. So I go down and I go into the lobby, and my mom is holding my little brother crying, and my grandma's there too. And they come out with my brother, and they are talking. The person who did my intake and the person who did my brother's, he told her that my brother didn't say anything. So they took me to another room where I'm not sure what it's called, but like it's kind of like a rape kit. They did that on me.
At school?
No, at the Children's Place.
Okay.
Yeah,
How
they
was
did a
that?
rape.
Was that very uncomfortable?
It was very uncomfortable. I didn't understand what was going on. And they told me that I could look at the TV and watch, and I was like, I don't want to watch. And there was the person who was doing it, and then 2 other people in the room. And then they eventually let me go. And so I went out to the lobby, and they gave us dinner. And I remember that night when we left at like, I think 11 o'clock at night, my mom dropped us off at her friend's house, and she said that she had to go deal with stuff. But it turns out my father was locked down on the military base because he was in the Air Force. But
When they did the rape kit, did it come back to prove?
I don't know. I don't know any of that.
Okay.
But
So then what happened next?
yeah, so then a couple of days later, my mom talked to me about the boy who cried wolf. And so she told me the story, and I was like, and she was like, you can't see your dad can't see you or your brothers because of what you said. And so I was like, okay. So OCS called, and I told them that everything I said wasn't true, that I wanted to be with my family and I wanted my mom. And they were like, are you sure? And I was like, yes. So that the next day they came over and they took me out to one of their office vehicles and sat there and talked to me. And I told them everything. And they were like, they said, what happened to you, was it true? And I was like, yes, it was. And they were like, okay. So they talked to my mom, and my mom, I was in my room, and I could hear my mom crying outside on the front porch. And I came out into the hallway, and my mom said I needed to go pack a week's worth of clothes. So I went into my room and I packed some clothes, and I went out to the front porch, and she was getting in the car. So I put my stuff in the car, and she told me that I was going to go stay with her friend for a little bit until they figured everything out. And for a while, I resented my mom because of the last thing she said to me. When she dropped me off at my first foster home, when she dropped me off at her house, she told me that everything would be okay. And I resented her for it because my entire experience with OCS was not okay.
Right.
So I resented her for that.
So what happened then? Did CPS take you and you packed a bag?
Yep. They followed my mom to that house to make sure she dropped me off. And when I was in the home, that first home, I was there for 3 weeks, and I was still in school. I was in 4th grade, and I would go to my brother's classroom to see him, and he would bring me stuff from home, like a blanket, one of my pillows. And at one point, I really missed my mom, so I took one of their bikes and I rode my bike all the way to my mom's house.
How far was that?
Without telling anyone. It was about, I think it was a 30-minute walk, 30 minutes to 45-minute walk. And so I rode my bike over there, and I knew I couldn't go on the property. And so I was crying at the end of the driveway. I was throwing rocks at the house to try and get their attention. And I couldn't get their attention, so I went to one of my friend's houses who lives on the same street. And I asked if they can go knock on the door for me, and they did. So my brother came out, and my grandma came out and said I couldn't see my mom, and that they loved me. And then my foster mom showed up to come get me. And I remember I could see my mom in the window crying, holding my brother. So, my little brother.
Were you and your mom close?
Yeah. She was my best friend growing up. Like, before I was taken, I couldn't go a night without seeing her. I couldn't stay the night at people's houses because I wanted to be with her. So the fact that I hadn't seen her in a week was already enough for me.
Right. And then the home that you stayed at for 3 weeks, did anything happen there?
No, it was more, they just couldn't take care of me. They only gave me $10 of food, $10 a week for food.
Right.
Yeah. So I spent the money at McDonald's down the street on the dollar menu. That's where I got all my food.
Was this a
And
foster home or was this a friend's house?
it wasn't an official foster home, but it was like a family friend. It was my mom's friend.
Okay.
And I was only there for 3 weeks, and I remember the lady who was taking care of me, she came home one day and said that I needed to pack my stuff, and I had 4 shirts and a pair of jeans. That's all I had. And she said I needed to pack my stuff, and that OCS was coming to pick me up to take me somewhere else. And so I went to another house that was further away, and she was probably one of my favorite foster homes. She was actually my favorite foster home, but she had 3 other foster kids after she got 3 other foster kids after I got there. So there was 4 of us, and one of the foster kids, so there was 2 girls and 2 boys, and the girl ended up going to a treatment facility, a lockdown, and the foster mom told OCS that my behavior was getting too bad, that I wasn't listening to the rules, and some other stuff was going on. And she was like, plus I'm leaving state for a few weeks, so can you just move her to a new foster home? So they moved me to a new foster home. And the next one was the worst one.
Tell me why.
I lived there for 2.5 years, and she would take me to her rental houses. She rented out some houses, and she would leave, and before she would leave, she would say, I'll be back in 30 minutes, and then you can come home and we'll eat dinner. And I was like, okay. So then an hour passes by, 3 hours pass by, 5 hours pass by, and her oldest son shows up, her biological son. He comes over and he was like, you can come home now. And I was stuck at that rental place cleaning rat poop, dirty diapers, sweeping and mopping floors, just cleaning the entire house. And so I went back, and almost every night she would have me work out in her big shed that she was trying to set up a garage sale. And she had millions of stuff. It was a lot. And she would have me out there for hours on end organizing everything in the cold, in the winter, all alone. And she would go out and do stuff with her other kids. And then she got another kid. He was 8 years old at the time, and he had ADHD, so he couldn't concentrate on one thing. He couldn't stick to one job. And she would get really upset at him for not doing what he was supposed to. And she would scream at him, yell at him, and she would keep adding on to what he had to do. And at one point, I started helping him do his stuff because I felt bad for him. So, and I was the one taking care of her animals. She had a dog and a rabbit. I took care of both of them. And she wouldn't let me have friends. I was part of a Girl Scout troop, and she was the leader. And her biological daughter was a year younger than me, and she was part of that group. So she invited all the girls from the Girl Scout troop, she invited all of them to come stay the night. And there was 6 of us. 5 of them, they all got to sleep in the living room except for me. I had to sleep in my room. I wasn't allowed to be friends with them. And I went to OCS about it, and I said, I don't like her daughter, they don't treat me right. And they're like, we know her, she's not that bad. And they told my foster mom that what I told them. And so one night she was talking to me. She said, you need to tell me what you told OCS. And I told her it's none of her business. And she was like, I already know, so you might as well just tell me. And I said, no, I'm not telling you. And she wouldn't let me go to bed until I told her. So 1 a.m. comes around, and she's sitting watching TV, and I'm sitting on the stairs falling asleep, and she keeps waking me up. So then I get really angry, and I start throwing shoes and pulling everything off the coat rack. And the house was a mess because I was so angry. And about another hour later, she went down to her room and told me to follow her. And so I go down there, and she was like, are you going to tell me what happened? Like what you told them? And I was like, no. She was like, fine, go to bed. We'll continue this tomorrow. So the next day, we're in her car, and we're driving down the road, and she was like, okay, are you going to tell me what you told them? And I was like, no. And we stop at this ice cream shop. And she was like, I will buy you an ice cream if you tell me what you told them. I was like, okay. I told them I don't like you or your daughter. She was like, is that all? And I was like, no, but that's all you're going to get. And she was like, fine. So she gave me ice cream, but I told OCS about that. They didn't care. And then one night, the previous foster mom wanted me to come over for like a sleepover and just hang out and catch up. And she texted the foster mom I had then. She was like, why do you want her? And she was like, because she's worth a lot of money. And after that, I never viewed her the same. I was like, she doesn't want me because she wants to help. She wants me because she wants money. And I never was the same with her after that. And eventually she told me that she didn't want me to leave. She wanted to adopt me. I told her I didn't want that. And so at the end of that, I was supposed to come to Pennsylvania to live with my family, a family member. It was my aunt. And my aunt had flown up to Alaska to visit me because I hadn't seen her in so long. And we wanted to reconnect and talk about what we've been up to. And so we did that, and I really liked her. So then I decided that I wanted to live with her. Well, that foster mom said to tell OCS I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to be with my aunt. And I was like, but that's not what I want. And she was like, just tell them that. So OCS came and talked to me, and they're like, what do you want? Like, what do you want? and I started crying because I didn't know whether to say something or not. So I said, she told me not to tell you, but she wants me to stay here. And they look at me and they're like, but what do you want? I was like, I want to go to Pennsylvania. So they removed me from that home that night, and I went to a new foster home, and that's when she sold all my stuff, kept it, whatever. And I had a trash bag full of stuff, and I lived there for 2.5 years. That's all I had, is a trash bag full of stuff. I was only there for 4 or 5 weeks, and it was just temporary, and she was nice, and she treated me well. She lived with her mom. Her mom was older, so she needed extra help around the house. And she had a foster daughter who was 18, and she was going to age out of the system. So I kind of looked up to her a little bit. But then I ended up moving to Pennsylvania for a few months, for 7 months. And I had a hard time adjusting. I was depressed. I was angry. And I just didn't like life as it was. And they decided that they couldn't handle me. And I was here for 7 months, and I saw my bio mom once. And that was 2 days before I moved back to Alaska.
Why did you see her once? Was there...
Because OCS wouldn't let me see her. At that time, she had already moved to Pennsylvania to get away from my father. And he ended up finding her. But she got restraining orders on him. And he couldn't bother her, so he never did.
How are you now?
I'm better. I still suffer from depression and anxiety. I was recently diagnosed with bipolar. And I'm on medication for that, and it's going a little bumpy. And I live with my bio mom, and it's different, and I can definitely tell that I'm a little more mature than her, and I care about her more than she cares about me, but it doesn't change the fact that she's my mom. So,
yeah.
But my little brother is now 8. He's all grown up. He has his own issues. He has schizophrenia, ADHD, autism, so he's a handful.
Are you receiving any type of therapy?
I was doing therapy before all the COVID stuff happened, and after that I haven't been able to find a therapist, and I don't have medical insurance.
What would you tell somebody who's going through this?
I would tell them that there's definitely going to be bumps in the road. Some of them will be mountains, some of them will be hills, but you just got to climb it and get back to the other side.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to be rough, but you just got to roll with the punches.
You're pretty brave. You've gone through a lot.
Yeah, I want to become a social worker, so I want to make a change.
I think that's amazing. How's your relationship with your mom? Do you guys talk about the past and the things that you've gone through?
We do sometimes. A lot of the time I ask her some questions about it, like some parts I don't understand completely. And I recently got my file from OCS, and I was reading through it, and some of it did make sense, and so I would ask my mom about it, and she would help me process through that. My older brother, we were growing up, we were always close to each other. We relied on each other for support. And now it's like we're siblings, but we're not really connected anymore. And I think that's one of the most damaging things it did to me and my brother is our relationship. Because he was my one support that I could go to whenever I needed something, and I was taken from that.
Yeah. I think that you are so brave, and I know that just today, starting today, I know that you're going to help change somebody's life by speaking up and sharing what you've gone through and letting people know that if this stuff happens to you, it's not your fault. It's not because you asked for it. You didn't do anything to deserve it. And that they're not the only one. You're not the only one.
Yeah, one of my really close friends, her and I connected on that level because our fathers did the same stuff to us, and we were able to connect on that level, and we never lost our friendship, and it's been quite a few years. We help out each other.
I thank you for sharing. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hope you have an amazing day.
Okay, you too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.